Fostering the arts, pictorial and photographic contributions. I want to emphasize the reproduction of pictures and works of art, pictures which shall reproduce and make beautiful darker faces. This calls for color printing, which is today costly. We should reproduce the work of artists today who are painting and molding black folk. Fostering African American art in his magazine has always been crucial to Du Bois's editorial agenda, and this quote from a crisis memorandum demonstrates. On the other hand, he wanted to encourage black artists to help them to publish their work, but on the other hand, Du Bois was also well aware of the power of the visual image. It was of utmost importance to help him challenge the conventional racist pictures prevailing in American society, and to reinterpret the visual culture by adding non-stereotyped and authentic representations of blacks and their daily life. He had already availed himself of the relatively new medium of photography as perfect means to provide authentic images in his American Negro exhibit in the Paris exhibition of 1900. Jean-Michel Smith, who sees Du Bois as a visual theorist of race, states that his American Negro photographs disrupt the images of African Americans produced through the eyes of others by simultaneously reproducing and supplanting those images with a different vision of the American Negro. For children, pictures are important on a more general level. They appeal to their imagination and provide visual complements to the stories which they embellish. Illustrations are an essential component of a children's story because they keep young readers absorbed in their periodical and entertain those who are not yet able to read themselves. Approximately 1 in 3 Brownies books pages contain drawn visuals, about 29%. On average, the editors published about 10 pages of drawings, including calligraphy and notes, and photos per issue, which seemed to be a rather low yield compared to present-day periodicals for children. Yet the amount of visual material seems to correspond with the standard of the time. As my analysis of St. Nicholas has shown in this popular magazine for white children, also 1 in 3 pictures featured visuals in 1921, 28%. The number of pages including drawings and photos roughly balance each other in Du Bois' publications, but it offers more than twice as many single photos as drawings, 513 versus 216. It has already been explained that the crisis received an abundance of children's pictures for publication in the children's number, but never had enough space available to include all of them. The Brownies book turned into another outlet for the pictures and contained a myriad of children's and adolescents' portraits, especially in the section entitled Our Little Friends and People of the Month, and in the articles hailing high school and college graduates, which explains why the photos outnumber the drawings. The preponderance of photos also shows that personalization was an important method used by Du Bois and Fawcett to keep the readers absorbed in the periodical, and that photography was one of their main strategies to make blacks visible. Moreover, all texts were, at some stage, embellished by illustrations except As the Crow Flies. Only the headline of Du Bois' column was adorned and turned into recurring emblem. Other small logos were designed for the judge, the jury, and playtime, which allowed for instant recognition of these particular contributions. One regular feature entitled Our Little Friends, which has not yet been discussed, was almost entirely reserved for the reproduction of children's photographs. The section appeared in 22 issues and always covers 1 page. In May and July 1920, it includes photos of children as well as poems and is therefore classified as poetry. The remaining 20 Our Little Friends exclusively contain photographs and can be considered the constituent with the highest amount of visual material. The headline of the page is richly adorned and an example of calligraphy to be found in Du Bois' children's magazine. It may be assumed that the editor designed this section especially for the publication of the great quantity of children's pictures which proud parents sent to the crisis office because they wanted to see their babies in print. Our Little Friends features a total of 106 portraits or full-body photographs between 4 and 9 per page of African American boys and girls of various ages, either alone or together with their siblings. They remain anonymous. As explained earlier, reminiscent of Victorian-style portraits, the children are well-groomed and the majority are dressed in white, and they are all posing for the camera. Most of the photos were taken in a professional studio. These images are typical manifestations of middle-class pride. There are hardly any snapshots which, for instance, show children at play or absorbed in other pastime activities. Jennifer Precola remarks that by the early 1900s, Kodak has managed to launch a simple and inexpensive camera which made it possible for parents to take more pictures of their children themselves. She criticizes Dubois for not offering deeper insight into the daily life of African American children by including more of these informal snapshots in his magazine. Thomas J. Schlereth affirms that at the time of the publication, the Brownies book children indeed had to start to dominate the turn-of-the-century snapshot album, indicating not only the greater ease by which they could be photographed at home rather than a photographer's studio, but the new adult view of them in a distinct life stage. In a crisis editorial, Dubois himself states with regard to children's photos that they do not want merely pretty babies or babies all dressed up, but real living children. The Brownies books include a few snapshots depicting children with their animals at the beach or at play, but Victorian-style photos are indeed more common. This preference can be accounted for by the fact that it was one of the periodical's main objectives to combat stereotypes and counter the prevailing degrading images, which could be achieved by showing up ideal children and middle-class respectability, a topic which will be taken up in more detail at a later point. There is also a more practical reason why the magazine did not include more snapshots. The engraving procedure was simply not yet advanced enough to reproduce every photo which was sent to the crisis. In various crisis editorials, Dubois explains which kind of photographs were suitable for publication. In 1926, he writes, "We cannot use cuts, except in very few cases, and we cannot use prints, pictures printed from cuts. We must have original photographs or drawings in inky ink or charcoal. Photographs should be clear and recent. A good picture cannot be made from a poor, faded, indistinct old photograph. Remember that engraving from a photograph is always a poorer picture than the photograph. Snapshots make poor engravings unless unusually sharp and good. If possible, have a new clear photograph taken, ask the photographer for a shiny print unmounted to be used for reproduction in a magazine." The quote shows that even though private photography started to become more common in the early 20th century, snapshots were still hard to reproduce in a periodical. It appears that, for quality's sake, Dubois and Fawcett still preferred professional photography. As said before, Little People of the Month also has a high share of visual material. Like Our Little Friends, it only features photos. They depict the little achievers who are praised in the column. In most cases, their names are indicated in the caption, which distinguished this section from Our Little Friends, which printed anonymous photographs. The column contains a total of 80 photos, which are, to a great majority, examples of professionally taken Victorian-style portraits. The nicely decorated headline is written in playful letters. The poems offer a considerable amount of images too, 32%. Most of them are drawings, 89%. The artists frequently accentuated a poem's content with their artwork, which indicates that they had either read the verses before they embellished them or that the editors had been informed about the main subjects in advance. Hilda Wilkinson, for example, provided illustrations of various animals. For Fawcett's poem At the Zoo, 15 poems are especially richly adorned by frames which visualize scenes from the poems or reflect their mood. For Annette Christine Brown's Halloween, for instance, Laura Wheeler drew dressed-up children who are trick-or-treating. By depicting dense wood in the background and through an intense use of black, she creates a spooky, uncanny atmosphere mirroring the mood of the poem. The few photos published with the poems mostly have no connection with them. They depict scenes from the African American community, and the editors often merely use these photos to cover the remaining space on the page. Roughly 1 of 3 pages in the category instructional articles contain visual material. They have relatively high share of photography, which is for the most part due to the abundance of portraits of high school and college graduates appearing along with the articles Brownies graduates and college graduates of 1921. Unlike the photographic material added to the poems, the photos, and also the drawings, always authenticate the instructional articles. The Ostrich in Captivity includes photos of ostriches. The Quaintess Nest of St. Helena features photos depicting the daily life of the island's inhabitants, and Bullfight offers a picture of the bullfight area in Madrid, to name just a few examples. Dubois and Fawcett heavily relied on the mood of authentication to make these highly informative articles more appealing and frequently added illustrations, which help the readers to understand the text and keep them absorbed in their reading. The visuals to embellish the playlets exclusively consist of drawings and also roughly cover 1/3, 29%. All one-act plays but The Children's Treasure are illustrated. 4 of them even contain a one-page drawing which depicts a scene from the play, highlighted by a quote or a small subtitle referring to the text. As said before, the Brownies book accommodates 84 stories, and the great majority of them are adorned by illustrations. Only 22 consist entirely of text. The fiction comprises drawings as well as photos. The former outnumber the latter by far. 19 contributions feature one-page drawings, also together with a quote from or a subtitle referring to the text, which illustrates scenes from the stories. The smaller drawings, too, were especially designed to visualize the tales and their character. Moreover, it is striking that the first text of the periodical is always either a story or a one-act play, and that the titles of these opening features are normally especially richly adorned with drawings and playful letters. Du Bois's magazine also features one-page photo which personalizes the story. The story of Croesus is accompanied by a picture which shows the story hour at the Howe branch of the Cossett Library in Memphis, Tennessee. The caption reveals that the librarian Harriet A. Lee read the story of Croesus to her juvenile audience. In terms of personalization, it has to be mentioned that the Brownies book occasionally also publishes photos of the authors who write a story. By visualizing the writers or depicting a librarian who reads to children, Dubois and Fawcett tied their periodical to the oral tradition because the texts are, in a way, restored to orality. Other photos published with the fiction visualize the characters. Fawcett's story, Turkey Drumsticks, for example, include a photograph depicting Billy and Rosemary, the 2 child protagonists. Most likely, the children in the picture were not really called Billy and Rosemary, but could have been the boy and girl referred to in the story. By means of this kind of visualization, The Brownies had a better chance to identify with the character because they got the impression that Billy and Rosemary were actually members of the Black community. The biographies comprise 20% of visuals, 2/3 of drawings, 18 individual pieces, and 1/3 of photos, 6 individual pieces. I want to call attention to the fact that the photos of other texts which focus on life writing, such as Little People of the Month, or the articles detailing the high school graduates are included here. The share of visual material published with biographical constituents is considerably higher. This observation reveals once more how important the publication of various life stories was to the concept of Du Bois's magazine for children. With regards to the biographical sketches, the editors frequently added drawings which depict the hero or heroine. It seems likely that there was no photographic material available for many of these outstanding men and women, because they lived a long time ago. The photos appear along with the biographies of Samuel Coleridge Taylor, including a portrait and a photo of his gravestone. Bert Williams, Harriet Tubman, Charles S. Gilpin, and Olivia Platier. The Crispus Attucks biography shows the Crispus Attucks movement in Boston. The sketches concerning Katie Ferguson, Paul Cuffey, Denmark Vesey, Yada, Mary Bingley, Brave Brown Joe, Gandhi, and the two texts entitled Girls Together do not contain visual representation of their subjects at all. Cuffey's biography and Yada feature visual representation of their subjects at all. Cuffey's biography and Yada feature illustrations, though the editors supplied drawings of Katie Ferguson in a later issue. Maybe in answer to a girl's request who wrote in the jury that she would love to see pictures of Katie Ferguson and Captain Cuffey. If you have them, won't you print them? As said before, visual material in playtime, the section with the highest recreational value, is relatively scarce. Most of the illustrations are drawing, but the game division also frequently publishes notes or visualizes game instructions, which cannot be considered artwork. Playtime only features 4 photos. 2 appear in April 1920 and depict girls who present the dancing poses described in the article. The remaining 2 images are only loosely connected to the actual game descriptions. In March 1920, there is a photo which shows a community sing in Louisville, Kentucky, and the July 1920 playtime contains a small snapshot of children at play. The grown-ups corner, the jury, and the judge also have a very small amount of visuals. The grown-ups corner only includes 5 photos and no drawings. The photos depict pictures of children, a baby picture, a snapshot of playing children, and are not related to the letters in any way. Yet, they are in keeping with the editor's intention to make black children visible. The jury includes 1 sketch of a man with a violin case sent along with a letter by Helen Woods. 3 photos, which were also sent together with letters, depict letters writers with their animals, their friends and siblings, and visualize the life stories which the writers present in their correspondence. 1 snapshot shows children playing in Harlem, which is not related to the letters in any way. Moreover, there are 3 pages with photographs of children, printed either right before or right after the judge, which are meant to represent the jury. In April 1920, this page shows a group of black children. The caption reads, "This might be the jury," but in fact, it is a colored teacher's music class in Medford, Massachusetts. Again, the editors count on the means of personalization. These pictures help the children to identify with Du Bois' periodical, because they suggest that every child is a potential Brownies book reader, and a member of the jury. The judge only accommodates one photograph in March 1920 depicting two babies, which is not connected to the column and only used to fill the remaining space on the page. Apart from the images, which are published along with the texts, the magazine also includes drawings and photos which are context-free. Here, one can add 23 covers, one page each, and 24 frontispieces, one page each. The covers are very important to the composition of the periodical because, as the first visible page, they have to attract the children's attention immediately and entice them to start reading. One means to achieve this effect was by using colors. In April 1920, all covers are color prints, while in 1921 only the February, March, and April covers are color. As Dubois explained himself, color prints were expensive, and the magazine's tight financial means did not allow for them from April 1921 onwards anymore. The range of colors used for the covers included brown, orange, red, blue, and green, and sometimes the artist used up to 3 different colors for one drawing. 4 of the covers are photos and 19 are drawings. Most of the covers have a title which appears in the table of contents along with the credits. Cornelius Marion Batby's photo of a dancing girl has already been described in detail. The second photograph displays a body's bust of a boy entitled "I'm an American Citizen," and the remaining photos show Charlotte Elizabeth Crawford, a black girl, and Yvette Keelan, daughter of Sarah Talbert Keelan, who wrote for the Brownies book. Thus, also the covers were used to make black children visible. With regard to the drawings, Dubois and Fawcett chose outstanding works of art which were designed with much care, were well elaborated, and included many details. In the first year of publication and at the beginning of 1921, the cover drawings always fit the month of publication or, more generally, a particular season, and many are ethnographic. In April 1920, the cover depicts a girl and an Easter bunny. In May 1920, the Brownies see girls dancing around a maypole. The July 1920 cover is very patriotic, referring to the American Revolution, and in February 1921, Hilda Wilkinson Brown sets the mood for Valentine's Day with her sketch of a boy and girl in love, to name just a few. Her 4 covers are not seasonal. In June 1921, Curtis Brown contributed a portrait of a girl entitled "The Baby Belle," which is clearly in the context of establishing black ideal beauty. The drawing does not depict a Southern belle, the archetype of a young white woman of the South's upper class, but a beautifully elegant African-American girl. For September 1921, Marcellus Hawkins painted boys who have to decide if they go to school or play hooky instead. Albert Alexander Smith's only cover depicted white characters, and in November 1921, Hilda Wilkinson Brown donated a picture of a young girl entitled "A Maiden in Algiers," which extends the black beauty ideal to the African continent. A one-page frontispiece is an equally important visual component, which forms an integral part of the Brownies book. It always follows the table of contents and precedes the first text. Like the cover, the frontispiece helps to establish the mood of the issue and also invites the children to start reading. There is always a short description of the scene in the map, and a shortened title version appears in the table of contents. All frontispieces are one photograph. In December 1921, Dubois and Fawcett included a drawing entitled The Little Mother, a reprint of Hofstad Pusham's 1918 oil and canvas portrait, which shows a young black woman holding a apparently white baby in her arms. For the most part, the photographs make blacks visible by displaying members or of episodes from the African American community. The April 1921 issue, for instance, offers a scene from a play called The Captain of Plymouth, which commemorates the landing of the Mayflower at Plymouth Bay in 1620 with an entirely black cast, thus adding a black presence to American history. And the July 1920 frontispiece depicts the commencement ceremony at Tuskegee. Two frontispieces present famous African American figures who visited the United States. In January 1920, the Brownies book includes a photo of Her Royal Highness Zawditu, Queen of the Kings of Abyssinia, Empress of Ethiopia, which has already been discussed earlier, and the September 1921 frontispieces display President Charles Dunbar Burger, King of Liberia, paying tribute to the memory of Lincoln. Two photos carry the readers entirely off to Africa, or more specifically to Cameroon, and show children spinning cotton at a wedding in Fungan. The majority of the remaining context-free photographs cover one page and, like the frontispieces, mostly depict members of and episodes from the African American community. It also offers scenes from Africa, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Normally, there is also a short description of the caption, and an abridged version is included in the table of contents. All but 7 issues containing context-free photos which cover at least half a page. Context-free drawings, on the other hand, are scarce. And the Brownies book only features one page of children's sketches in May 1920, a portrait of Katie Ferguson in June 1920, covering 3/4 of a page supplementing her biography published in the January 1920 issue. A one-page whole-body painting of the Marquis de Lafayette and a black man in front of a battleground in September 1920, and Hilda Wilkinson Brown's one-page drawing of a black child entitled Goodbye in December 1921, which is her artistic way to bid farewell to the magazine. The fact that there are only very few unrelated drawings demonstrates again that they were especially designed to embellish the text and visualize their content and to make them more appealing to juvenile readership. All in all, the artwork in the Brownies book was carefully designated and chosen with consideration. Diane Johnson maintains that in the illustrations of African American children's literature, the memories furnished must be communal memories. The fantasies conveyed must be the dreams of and for the community, as well as for the self, and the adventures cannot be skipped through. Dubois' children's periodical unquestionably meets this demand, especially by accommodating an abundance of portraits of African American children and photos which depict African American communal life. The artists obviously put their heart into the drawings and tried to visualize the characters and scenes for the reader with their pictures. As said before, the Brownies book was a means for Black artists to gain recognition. Their work didn't indeed go unnoticed, and was acknowledged by their white contemporaries. For Myra Lee, for example, praises the magazine's drawings in the New York Evening Post in 1921, and especially hails their buoyancy. There are a lightness and imaginative quality about the illustrations of Francis Grant, Hilda R. Wilkinson, and Marcellus Hawkins. Briar Rabbit has limitless energy about his long legs and contagious twinkle about his eye, a jaunty nonchalance about his floppy ears. Briar Possum has a surprising fluffy blackness that adds immeasurably to the individuality of his character. There are action, belief, excitement about these pictures, a sort of pagan joyousness and a freshness that talks to the heart of children. The drawings and photographs are indeed full of life and very appealing to the eye, and offered very young children who are not able to read an incentive to open and enjoy the magazine. Normally, African American children did not see their pictures printed in children's books, and mostly had to look at white faces. The inclusion of their photographs gave the readers the opportunity to eye other brownies, and helped them to visualize the various kinds of life stories presented throughout the magazine. In particular, the photos were an essential means of authentication and personalization, and, even more importantly, they were indispensable in order to make blackness visible and to attest the beauty of African Americans. Patricia A. Young goes too far, though, in claiming that the graphic images were emphasized and the text was de-emphasized, not because it was unimportant, but because images of this nature took visual preference by default. Although the quality of the pictorial contributions in the Brownies book is without a doubt for the most part excellent, the visual material is crucial to the periodical's composition, as well as essential to Dubois' mission to instill self-pride and race pride in his young readers. One might not disregard the writer's contribution. Not only are they as important as the illustrations to the magazine's structure and aims, but they also cover far more space in the periodical, which is in itself already confutes Young's argument of de-emphasis. And since only about 1 in 3 pages features pictures, one might even go so far as to asking if the quantity of visuals was high enough for a publication for children, and thus really sufficient to offer balance to the text.